The airlock hisses open before I am ready for it, and 6 armed inspectors step through in a single smooth line, their boots clicking against the deck plating of our cargo hold. I do not have time to hide anything, because there is nothing to hide. Our ship, the Silver Tide, carries grain and medical supplies, nothing more. But the compact does not care what we carry, they care what we are. A voice crackles through a translator collar strapped to the lead inspector's throat. Stand in a line, hands where we can see them. Do not speak unless spoken to. I glance at my crew, 4 people I have flown with for 6 years, and I see the same tight fear behind their eyes that I feel in my own chest. Nora grips the edge of a crate until her knuckles turn white. Owen stares straight ahead, jaw locked. Liam, our youngest, is trembling so slightly that only someone who has watched him for years would notice. I step into the line because there is no other choice. Refusing an inspection out here, 3 jumps from the nearest human colony, is the same as signing a confession for a crime that does not exist. The compact patrol ships outnumber us 100 to 1 in this system. We are a speck of dust floating near their border, and dust does not get to say no. A floating monitor drifts down the line, a smooth silver disc the size of a dinner plate, humming softly as it passes over each of us. I have heard about these things from other freighter captains who cross compact space. They do not just scan for hidden blades or plasma cores. They read bodies, blood chemistry, muscle density, neural activity, heart rhythm, every secret your body carries, laid bare in less time than it takes to blink. The monitor passes over Nora first. A short chime, green light, nothing unusual. It moves to Owen. Same chime, same green light. Liam next, and his fear registers as a small flicker of orange, but the machine seems to expect that from someone young and scared, because the light steadies to green a second later. Then it reaches me. I do not brace for it, because I have nothing to brace against. I am not carrying a weapon. I am not hiding anything under my jacket or beneath my skin. I am simply a cargo pilot who wants to get home to a wife who is waiting for a message that says everything is fine. It just stops, hovering in front of my chest, its hum rising in pitch like a question it does not know how to finish asking. The lead inspector, a tall figure with plaited gray skin and eyes like polished stone, steps closer and studies a display that only he can see, projected across one dark lens fitted over his left eye. Something in his posture changes. His shoulders draw back. His hand drifts, slow and deliberate, toward a weapon holstered at his hip. I keep my hands raised and my voice level, though every instinct in me wants to ask what is wrong. I have learned, over 6 years of trade routes through contested space, that panic is the fastest way to turn a misunderstanding into something you cannot undo. Something is registering, the inspector says, his translator collar flattening the words into something cold and mechanical, something the monitor cannot classify. Nora looks at me, eyes wide, silently asking if I know what is happening. I do not. I have never had a scan stop on me before. I have crossed this border 11 times. 11 times. The monitor passed over me the same way it passed over everyone else. A quick chime, a quick light, nothing more. The inspector raises a hand, and the other 5 soldiers behind him lift their weapons an inch, not aiming yet, but ready. The air in the cargo hold goes thin, like all the oxygen has been pulled out through a crack I cannot see. "Explain yourself," the inspector says. I do not know what he wants me to explain. I have no weapon. I have no illegal cargo. I have nothing but a heartbeat that is currently trying to escape through my ribs, because apparently my body has decided this is the moment to remind me exactly how frightened I am. I have nothing to explain, I say. I am not carrying anything dangerous. I do not know why your machine is reacting this way. The inspector does not answer right away. Instead, he taps the side of his lens, and the projected display flickers, casting a faint blue light across half his face. Whatever he sees there makes him go very still. Behind him, one of the soldiers mutters something in a language my translator cannot catch, and though I do not understand the words, I understand the tone. It is the tone people use when they see something that should not exist. The lead inspector steps close enough that I can see my own reflection in the dark lens covering his eye. Whatever is happening inside my chest, it is happening in front of him now, magnified and displayed, and I have no idea what story it is telling. "Your species designation is human," he says slowly, as if testing the word. "Yes," I answer. He studies me a moment longer, and something behind his stone-colored eyes shifts, not into anger, but into something closer to caution, the kind of caution a person shows when they realize they might be standing closer to danger than they thought. "The monitor is not detecting a device," he says. "It is detecting you." My mouth goes dry. I do not know how to respond to being called a threat simply for existing, simply for having a body that beats faster when 6 armed strangers surround it in a cargo hold at the edge of known space. But I do not get the chance to respond, because the inspector raises his hand again, and this time it is not a gesture of caution. It is a command. "Separate him from the others," he says. "Now." 2 soldiers step forward and take hold of my arms, not violently, but with a grip that leaves no room for argument. Nora starts to protest, taking half a step forward, but a 3rd soldier turns a weapon toward her, and I shout at her to stay back before she does something that cannot be undone. "Stay calm," I tell her, though my own voice is anything but calm. "Stay calm, all of you. I will be fine." I do not know if that is true, but I say it anyway, because sometimes the only weapon you have left is your own steady voice, and I intend to use it for as long as I can. They lead me out of the cargo hold and down a narrow corridor connecting our ship to their inspection vessel, a corridor lined with cold white light and walls that hum faintly with unfamiliar machinery. My crew's voices fade behind me, swallowed by a ceiling door, and for the first time since the airlock opened, I am completely alone with people who see something inside me that even I cannot name. The lead inspector walks a step ahead of me, occasionally glancing back as though he expects me to do something unpredictable. I want to tell him I have no intention of doing anything except getting home safely, but I sense that words will not fix this. Whatever the monitor saw, it was not something a sentence could undo. We stop in front of a sealed chamber, its door sliding open with a soft mechanical sigh. Inside is a chair, restraints folded neatly at its sides, and a wall of dark paneling that I suspect hides more scanning equipment than I want to imagine. "Sit," the inspector says. I sit, because there is nothing else to do. As the restraints close gently but firmly around my wrists, I glance up at the inspector, searching his stone-colored eyes for some hint of what happens next. He studies me for a long moment, and then he says something that chills me more than any weapon pointed at my chest ever could. "We have seen this reading only once before," he says quietly, "and it did not end well for us." The door seals shut behind him, and I am left alone in a small white room, restrained in a chair, 3 jumps from home, with no weapon, no crime, and a heartbeat that apparently terrifies an entire species more than any blade ever could. I sit in the restraint chair for what feels like hours, though a small chronometer embedded in the wall tells me it has only been 11 minutes. The room is silent, except for a faint electrical hum beneath the floor, the kind of sound that never quite fades, no matter how hard you try to ignore it. I flex my fingers inside the restraints, testing them out of habit rather than hope, and the metal does not give even slightly. The door slides open, and the same lead inspector steps inside, followed by a second figure I have not seen before. This one is shorter, with a narrower build and deep violet markings across its cheeks that shimmer faintly under the room's lighting. It carries a data slate in one hand, tapping something into it as it enters, without once looking at me. The first inspector introduces the newcomer with a short phrase that my translator collar renders simply as Officer Vural Ket, Compact Medical Division. Vural Ket finally looks up from the slate, studying my face with an expression I cannot read, somewhere between curiosity and concern. "You understand why you are here," Vural Ket says, voice smooth despite the mechanical flattening of the translator. "No," I answer honestly. "I do not." Vural Ket tilts its head slightly, an expression that might be surprise on a human face, but means something entirely different on theirs. It taps the slate again, and a small holographic display flickers to life above it, showing a wave pattern I recognize instantly, even upside down. It is a heartbeat, my heartbeat. This is your cardiac signature from the moment the monitor scanned you, Viralket says. Do you notice anything unusual about it? I study the pattern, the peaks and dips forming a rhythm that looks, to my eyes, like nothing more than a heart beating a little too fast. I do not see anything unusual, I say. I was frightened. My heart raced. That is what a heart does when it is frightened. Viralket exchanges a glance with the lead inspector, something passing between them that I am not meant to understand. Then it turns the slate toward me, tapping a second pattern beside the first, this one jagged and erratic, spiking wildly before collapsing into stillness. This is a typical fear response, Viralket says, gesturing to the erratic pattern. This is what fear looks like in every species we have surveyed across 11 star systems. Chaotic, uncontrolled, the body betraying the mind. Then it points back to my own heartbeat, steady despite its speed, rising and falling in a rhythm that, now that I look closely, does seem almost deliberate. This is yours, Viralket says. Elevated, yes. Fast, yes. But controlled, patterned, as though something inside you decided how frightened to be, and then executed that decision precisely. I do not know what to say, because I have never thought about my own heartbeat as something I control. I simply breathed slowly, the way I always do when I am scared, counting each inhale and exhale until my thoughts stopped spinning. It is something I learned as a teenager, back when I used to panic during storms, and my grandmother taught me to breathe in for 4 counts and out for 4 counts until the fear passed through me like weather. I was just trying to stay calm, I say. That is all. I was scared, and I did what I always do when I am scared. I breathe, I count. I focus on something steady until the fear passes. Viralket's markings shift slightly, deepening in color, and the lead inspector shifts his weight, clearly uncomfortable with my answer, though I cannot understand why something so simple would unsettle him. You are describing conscious regulation of an involuntary system, Viralket says slowly, as if translating the idea for itself as much as for me. Your species can consciously override its own fear response, in real time, without mechanical or chemical assistance. Is that so unusual, I ask, genuinely confused. Every human learns some version of this. Soldiers, pilots, doctors, parents calming a crying child in the middle of the night. It is not a power. It is just something we practice. Viralket does not answer right away. Instead, it turns to the lead inspector and speaks in their own language, rapid and clipped, and though my translator cannot catch every word, I hear the phrase pre-attack signature repeated twice, and my stomach tightens into a cold, hard knot. I do not know what a pre-attack signature is, but I can guess, based on the way both inspectors are now looking at me, that it is not a compliment. You misunderstand my calm, I say quickly, trying to keep my voice steady, despite the sudden fear clawing up my throat. I am not preparing to do anything. I am a cargo pilot. I carry grain and medicine. I have never held a weapon in my life, beyond the kind used to hunt for food back home. Viralket studies me for a long moment, then taps something into the slate, and the holographic display shifts again, showing a new image, this one grainy and old, clearly pulled from some archived record. It shows a heartbeat pattern nearly identical to mine, steady despite elevation, controlled despite fear. This reading was recorded 18 years ago, Viralket says quietly, during what our historical records call the War of Introduction. Do you know of it? I do know of it, though only through stories passed down from my grandfather, who served during humanity's brief and chaotic first encounters with species beyond our solar system. It was a confusing, painful chapter, full of misunderstandings on both sides, ending not in victory or defeat, but in a fragile peace that neither side fully trusted. I know it ended badly for everyone involved, I say carefully. It ended badly for us, Viralket says, and for the first time, I hear something beneath the mechanical translation that sounds almost like old grief. Every soldier who exhibited this cardiac pattern during that conflict did something unexpected in the moments that followed, something none of our tactical models predicted. "What?" I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Viralket does not answer immediately. It sets down the slate and studies me with an expression that, despite the alien features, I recognize instantly, because I have seen it on human faces before. It is the expression of someone trying to decide whether the person in front of them is dangerous or simply misunderstood, and finding no easy answer either way. They survived situations our models calculated as unsurvivable, Viralket finally says, and in every recorded instance, the outcome shifted in their favor within minutes of this exact cardiac pattern appearing. The room falls silent except for the faint electrical hum beneath the floor. I sit in the restraint chair, my own heartbeat steady despite everything, and I realize, with a slow, creeping horror, that the very thing keeping me calm right now is the same thing convincing an entire species that I might be the most dangerous person on this ship. "I am not a soldier," I say quietly. "I am not here to fight anyone. I just want to go home." Viralket studies me a moment longer, then turns to the lead inspector and says something in their own language, low and uncertain. The lead inspector's stone-colored eyes never leave my face, and I understand, without needing a translation, that my simple explanation has not settled anything. If anything, it has only deepened the question neither of them seems ready to answer. "What happens now?" I ask, when the silence stretches too long for me to bear. "Now," Viralket says slowly, "we determine whether your calm is a coincidence, or whether every human heart does this, waiting quietly, patiently, for the exact moment it decides to become something else entirely." I want to tell them it is nothing more than breathing exercises and counted breaths, nothing more than a frightened man trying not to fall apart in front of armed strangers. But looking at the fear behind Viralket's violet markings and the tension coiled in the lead inspector's shoulders, I understand that no explanation I offer will matter nearly as much as what my own body continues to do, steady and patient, without asking my permission at all. The restraints loosen slightly, not enough to free me, but enough to let me shift in the chair without pain. Viralket steps closer, and for the first time since this ordeal began, its voice softens into something that sounds almost like genuine curiosity rather than suspicion. "Explain the breathing method to me," Viralket says, "not as a defense, as information." I take a slow breath, partly to steady myself, and partly because the request feels strange, almost gentle after everything else. "It is simple," I say. "When fear rises, the body wants to speed everything up, breathing, heartbeat, thoughts. But if you slow the breath first, in for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4, the rest of the body follows. It is not magic, it is just biology responding to a signal you choose to send it." Viralket taps this into the slate, and for a moment, I almost feel like I am back in a classroom rather than an interrogation chamber. "You are saying the mind can instruct the body to disregard its own survival signals," Viralket says slowly. "Not disregard," I correct gently. "Manage. The fear is still there. I still feel it. I am simply choosing not to let it control what I do next." The lead inspector, who has remained silent for several minutes, finally speaks, his voice carrying a weight that makes Viralket's markings darken slightly. "This is precisely the concern," he says. "A species capable of consciously managing its own fear response is a species capable of appearing calm while making dangerous decisions. Predictability is safety. Your kind offers us none." I understand, in that moment, that the problem was never really about weapons hidden beneath my skin, or explosives tucked into cargo crates. The problem is something far harder to scan for, something no monitor can measure with certainty. The problem is that my calm does not reassure them, it unsettles them, because to a species that reads fear as chaos, controlled fear looks like something far more dangerous, a mind steady enough to plan even while the body screams to run. "I am not trying to unsettle anyone," I say quietly. "I am only trying to survive this conversation the same way I would survive any frightening moment. by staying calm enough to think clearly. Ket studies me for a long moment, then sets the slate aside entirely, folding its hands in a gesture that looks almost thoughtful. "Tell me about the moment your grandmother taught you this method," it says. Not the method itself, the moment. The question catches me off guard, mostly because it feels so unrelated to weapons and threats and cardiac signatures. But something in Ket's tone tells me this matters, so I answer honestly. "I was young, maybe 7 or 8, I say. There was a storm, the kind that shakes the walls of a house and makes the lights flicker. I was terrified, crying, hiding under a blanket. My grandmother sat beside me and told me fear was not something to fight. She said fear was just energy, and energy needed direction, not resistance. She taught me to breathe with her, slowly, counting together until the storm outside no longer felt bigger than the calm we had built inside ourselves." Ket is quiet for a long moment, and something in its expression shifts, softening slightly, though I cannot tell if it is sympathy or simply deeper calculation. "Your species teaches this skill to children," it says, "as comfort, not as a weapon." "As comfort," I confirm. Every human parent, in some form, teaches a version of this. It is not unique to me. It is not unique to soldiers or pilots. It is simply how humans learn to survive fear without letting it control them. The lead inspector steps forward again, his stone-colored eyes narrowing slightly. "And yet," he says, "every recorded instance of this pattern during the War of Introduction preceded a moment where the situation reversed entirely in favor of the human involved. Explain that, if this skill is merely comfort." I think carefully before answering, because I sense this question matters more than any other so far. "Maybe," I say slowly, "it is not that calm humans become dangerous. Maybe it is that humans who stay calm can think clearly enough to find a way out of situations that would otherwise overwhelm them. Calm is not an attack. Calm is clarity. And clarity, in a difficult moment, often looks like an advantage to whoever is watching from outside it." Ket exchanges another glance with the lead inspector, and this time, the silence between them feels different, less like suspicion and more like the beginning of understanding, or at least the beginning of a question neither of them expected to be asking. "If this skill is common among your species," Ket says slowly, "then every human we have ever encountered under stress may have been demonstrating exactly this. Not aggression, not concealment, simply clarity, mistaken for something far more threatening." I nod, relief loosening something tight in my chest for the first time since the airlock opened. "That would explain a great deal," I say quietly, "about both our species and the misunderstandings that led to that first painful conflict between us." The lead inspector remains silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable behind the plated gray skin and stone-colored eyes. Then he turns to Ket and speaks quietly in their own language, and though my translator only catches fragments, I hear the phrase "revise protocol" mentioned twice. And something in my chest loosens further, though I do not yet dare to hope this ordeal is truly ending. "We require more information," Ket says finally, turning back to me. "Not through fear, through understanding. If you are willing to explain further, without restraint, we may be able to resolve this matter without further complication." I glance down at the restraints, still loosely bound around my wrists, and something in Ket's tone tells me the offer is genuine. "I am willing," I say. "I would rather this end in understanding than in suspicion neither of us can undo." Ket nods, and for the first time, something that might be relief passes across its violet markings. "Then let us begin again," it says. Not as inspector and suspect, as two species finally asking the right questions of each other. The restraints release fully this time, and Ket gestures for me to stand, though the lead inspector remains near the door, his posture still cautious, still watching. I rub my wrists and follow Ket to a smaller console built into the far wall, where a new display flickers to life, showing rows of archived records stretching back decades. "These are every documented encounter between our species and yours during the War of Introduction," Ket says, scrolling through file after file. 11 separate incidents. In every one, Our forces recorded this same cardiac pattern in the human subjects moments before the situation resolved unexpectedly in their favor. I study the records as they scroll past. Brief mission logs, casualty reports, tactical summaries written in a clipped, clinical tone that somehow makes the old conflict feel even more tragic. I see names I do not recognize, humans who fought and negotiated and survived encounters that, according to compact calculations, should have ended very differently. "May I see one?" I ask. Viral Ket hesitates, then taps the console, pulling up a single file. A grainy recording plays, low resolution, clearly captured decades ago by some kind of drone camera. It shows a young woman, maybe my age, standing in a corridor much like the one outside this very room, surrounded by armed compact soldiers. Her heartbeat, displayed in the corner of the recording, spikes and then steadies into the same controlled rhythm Viral Ket showed me earlier. Moments later, without a single weapon drawn, she begins speaking calmly to the soldiers surrounding her, and within minutes, the entire encounter shifts from confrontation to negotiation. The recording ends with the soldiers lowering their weapons entirely, though the report attached to the file notes only that the outcome was unexpected and unfavorable to compact objectives. "She did not fight," I say quietly, watching the recording end. "She just stayed calm and talked to them." "Yes," Viral Ket says, "and our forces, trained to read hesitation and fear as opportunity, found themselves unable to predict her next move because her body gave no signals of panic for them to exploit. Her calm became, in effect, more powerful than any weapon we expected to face." I think about this for a long moment, watching the frozen final frame of the recording, the young woman's steady expression, the soldiers' lowered weapons. "That is not a weapon," I say slowly. "That is just someone who refused to let fear make her decisions for her." Viral Ket studies the frozen image alongside me, and for the first time since this ordeal began, its violet markings settle into something that looks almost like understanding, rather than suspicion. "Perhaps," it says quietly, "our mistake was never in what we detected. Perhaps our mistake was assuming controlled calm must always precede conflict, rather than considering it might simply precede clarity." The lead inspector steps closer now, his stone-colored eyes moving between the frozen recording and my own face, comparing, calculating. "If this pattern is universal among your species," he says slowly, "then every human encounter we misclassified as a precursor to conflict may have instead been a precursor to negotiation, misunderstood entirely because our own species reads calm as concealment." "That is possible," I say carefully. "Humans are not without conflict in our own history. We have made terrible mistakes, caused great harm to each other, and to other species we have met since leaving our solar system. But staying calm during fear is not the same as planning harm. It is simply how many of us choose to face difficult moments, whether that moment ends in conflict or in conversation." Viral Ket taps something into the console, and a new document begins forming on the display, filled with dense clinical language I can only partially read. "Recommendation for review." It reads at the top, followed by a long list of technical terms related to cardiac pattern recognition and threat assessment protocols. "I am filing an official recommendation," Viral Ket says, "that our threat detection systems be recalibrated regarding human biological responses. Controlled cardiac elevation should no longer be automatically classified alongside pre-conflict indicators. Further study is required before any similar detainment occurs again." The lead inspector reads the recommendation over Viral Ket's shoulder, his expression unreadable for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nods, and something in his posture finally eases, the tension that has held his shoulders rigid since the moment the monitor first stopped on my chest. "This will require approval from command," he says, "but I will support the recommendation. It is possible," he adds, glancing at me directly for the first time without suspicion coloring his stone-colored eyes, "that we have spent decades treating human calm as a threat, when it may have simply been an invitation to speak rather than to fight." I feel something loosen in my own chest, a tension I did not fully realize I was carrying until this very moment. "Thank you," I say quietly, meaning it more than the simple words can express. Viral Ket looks up from the console, its violet markings settling into an expression I can only describe as something close to respect. "You are free to return to your ship," it says. "Your crew has been informed there was a misunderstanding regarding your cardiac readings, and no further detainment is required." I nod, relief flooding through me so completely that I nearly forget to breathe. Ironic, given everything we have just discussed. As I turn to leave, Viral Ket speaks once more, its voice quieter now, almost hesitant. "May I ask one final question?" it says. "Of course," I answer. "If your species can teach a child to remain calm during fear," Viral Ket says slowly, "what does it look like when an adult human faces something truly threatening, something beyond a simple inspection or misunderstanding?" I consider the question carefully, thinking of storms weathered and hardships survived, of every difficult night made bearable through nothing more than steady breath and quiet determination. "I think it looks exactly like this," I say finally. "Steady, patient, waiting quietly for the moment fear becomes clarity, and clarity becomes a way forward." Viral Ket says nothing further, but something in its expression tells me the answer will occupy its thoughts long after I have left this room. The corridor back to my ship feels shorter than the one that brought me here, though I know the distance has not changed. My legs feel unsteady beneath me, adrenaline finally draining now that the danger has passed, leaving behind only exhaustion and a strange, quiet disbelief at everything that has just occurred. Nora meets me at the airlock, her face pale with worry, and the moment she sees me walking freely, she pulls me into a tight embrace before I can even speak. Owen and Liam stand just behind her, relief written plainly across both their faces, and for a long moment, none of us say anything at all, simply grateful to be standing together again. "What happened?" Nora finally asks, pulling back to study my face. I glance back down the corridor, where Viral Ket and the lead inspector remain standing near the sealed chamber door, watching us with expressions I still cannot fully read. "They thought my heartbeat was a weapon," I say slowly. "Turns out, it was just me trying to stay calm." Nora frowns, clearly confused, but there will be time to explain everything later, once we are safely back in open space, away from stone-colored eyes and violet markings and monitors that hum uncertain questions into the space between species. As we step back through the airlock into our own ship, I glance over my shoulder one final time. Viral Ket offers a small, unfamiliar gesture, something between a nod and a bow, and though I do not fully understand its meaning, I return it anyway, hoping the intention translates even where the words cannot. The airlock seals behind us with a soft hiss, and within minutes, the silver tide pulls away from the compact inspection vessel, engines humming steadily beneath our feet as we set course once again for home. I settle into the pilot's chair, hands steady on the controls despite everything that has just happened, and I allow myself, finally, a long, slow breath. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. The same breath my grandmother taught me during a storm decades ago, the same breath that apparently once ended a war before it truly began, and today, quietly, without a single weapon drawn, kept me safe long enough to come home. Somewhere behind us, in a small white room aboard a compact inspection vessel, an officer named Viral Ket sits alone with a data slate, staring at a single line of text scrolling across the screen, a recommendation that will, in time, change the way an entire species understands ours. They searched for weapons, expecting blades or plasma cores or hidden explosives tucked beneath cargo crates. Instead, they found a heartbeat, steady despite fear, patient despite danger, quietly proving that the most powerful thing a person can carry is not a weapon at all, but the simple, practiced ability to remain calm when everything around them insists that calm is impossible. As the stars stretch into streaks of light around the silver tide, carrying us steadily toward home, I think about that young woman in the old recording, calm among soldiers who expected panic, and I think about every human before and after her who learned the same quiet lesson passed down through countless storms and countless nights of fear, managed rather than feared. We were never the threat they imagined. We were simply steady, in a universe that mistook steadiness for danger, and somewhere among the stars, an entire species has finally begun to understand the difference.